Global significance and recent catalysts. The conflict in Ukraine, steadily progressing toward its conclusion yet remaining the world's most significant military confrontation, continues to act as the primary catalyst reshaping the entire international system. Critical development over the past 24-36 hours have proven pivotal, confirming analysis previously hinted at or openly discussed by figures like Ray McGovern. Specifically, Ukraine's attack on Russian strategic airfield, despite initial claims of success, yielded minimal physical destruction of Russian aircraft based on emerging evidence. Crucially, whatever limited tactical advantage Ukraine gained has been dramatically overshadowed by the severe negative reaction unfolding within the United States, revealing unforeseen strategic consequences tied to international arms control frameworks. START's treaty implications and U.S. alarm, a critical point initially overlooked, later clarified through private correspondence and public confirmations by General Michael Flynn, former DIA chief and Trump NSA, and General Blaine Holtz, centers on the START treaty. This agreement mandates Russia to keep strategic bombers visibly parked on runways for the verification, a provision exploited by Ukraine's drone strikes. With START's, the last remaining nuclear arms treaty between the US and Russia, due for renewal in a month, Washington is experiencing profound dismay. Prior discussions about extending the treaty have been superseded by acute fears that Ukraine's operation, leveraging START's transparency requirement to target bombers, may have irrevocably sabotaged renewal prospects. This stems from Russia's superior nuclear modernization trajectory, Russian nuclear asymmetry, and the Chinese factor. U.S. concern is rooted in Russia's current nuclear superiority and aggressive modernization, deployment of advanced ICBMs, YARS, Sarmat, hypersonic avant-garde glide vehicles, Bory-class submarines with Volava, SLBMs, and contrary to my earlier assessment, a highly secretive subsonic stealth intercontinental bomber program now in flight testing, scheduled for 2027 production. Russia actively produces these sophisticated systems at scale, while U.S. analogs remain in early development. China's unconstrained nuclear expansion compounds the threat. It fields growing ICBM and submarine capabilities, potentially accessing Russian submarine tech, and possess its own advanced stealth bomber programs. If START lapses, the U.S. face a simultaneous arms race against two adversaries whose programs are more mature, with China entirely unbound by treaty limitations. U.S. complicity and political fallout compounding U.S. anxiety is Russia's credible belief that Washington was deeply implicated in the airfield attacks, violating START's spirit by facilitating strikes on the very strategic assets the treaty exposed. U.S. foreknowledge is almost certain given Ukraine's 18-month planning window and pervasive American intelligence. Penetration in Kyiv's execution likely required real-time U.S. satellite data, potentially laundered via allies like Britain. While pro-Ukraine factions persist, sufficient anger exists among Kyiv officials to trigger a perceptible policy shift against Kyiv. This is reflected in Trump's rhetoric, calling Lindsey Graham's proposed bone-crushing sanctions on Russia's energy trade partner, China, India, too tough, and controversially, stating Ukraine's attack justified. Russian retaliation and implying Kyiv brought strikes upon itself. Sanctions bill, maneuvering, and constitutional conflict. The most telling indicator of shifting U.S. policy is the White House newly reported informal pressure on Senator Graham to dilute his sanctions bill. Administration officials proposed making its core mechanism mandatory 500% tariffs on nations importing Russian energy, presidentially discretionary, arguing the original bill. Unconstitutionally encroaches on executive foreign policy prerogatives. This view has legal merit. Similar legislation like CATSA face constitutional challenges, and the Supreme Court might well invalidate Graham's bill for restricting presidential authority. Trump, likely capitalizing on the airfield backlash, appears poised to sideline the legislation. Republican senators, sensing his opposition, will probably force Graham to accept amendments, reducing the bill to a symbolic endorsement of existing executive power rather than imposing new constraints. Ukraine's intransigence and proxy dilemma. Ukraine's reaction to these pressures underscore its role as a problematic proxy. Kyiv defiantly insists it will strike Russian target anywhere, dismissing concerns over START, US-Russia relations, or nuclear stability, while incessantly demanding more weapons, funding, and sanctions. This tail wags the dog dynamic reveals a fundamental imbalance. Ukraine leveraged US support without regard for Washington's strategic interests. Reports suggest Trump viewed Ukraine as a hindrance, prioritizes relations with Russia and trade, and disdains Zelensky. Yet, elements within the US establishment persist in supporting Ukraine's maximalist, high-risk action, even aiding operations like the airfields strikes, despite the acknowledged impossibility of defeating Russia and the clear danger of provoking wider conflict or treaty collapse. Prisoner exchange rejection and morale failure. Further demonstrating intransigence, Ukraine has walked back on the sole tangible outcome of recent Istanbul talks, refusing to accept the bodies of approximately 6,000 soldiers killed in Kharkiv per Russian claims, highlighting catastrophic losses embarrassing to Zelensky, and stalling a prisoner exchange. Trucks carrying bodies and prisoners were turned away at the border, likely due to the crippling cost of compensation to families and a desire to sabotage the Istanbul process after Zelensky deemed it a failure. This callous disregard for repatriating the dead and captured soldiers, consistent with Kyiv's 2022 negotiation ban, reveals a chilling morale and governance failure, prioritizing political narratives over the welfare of its military and citizens. Russian strategy and battlefield progress. Diplomatically, Russia appears ascendant, having countered sanction pressure. Militarily, it advances methodically, gaining ground near Sumy, containing Ukraine's costly symbolic Kearney incursions in Kharkiv, likely bolstered by North Korea support pledge, pressing near Kyiv and reaching key Ukrainian stronghold like Uman in Donetsk, setting conditions for a potential summer push toward the Dnipro. Russian outlets like Rybar, nationalists, pro-military, emphasize strategic patience over emotional retaliation for the airfield strikes, advocating systematic targeting of Ukrainian industry, energy, and commandants based on calculated military benefit, not provocation. This reflects Russia's historical focus on enduring victory through discipline, sustained action. Economic resilience and covert retaliation. Economically, Russia counters overheating narratives. The central bank's symbolic 1% rate cut 20% to 19% signal inflation's peak, reinforced by May's PMI data showing renewed expansion in services 52 and manufacturing 51. Underlying inflation is easing and a strong harvest to low food price. Industrialists had Alexander's shocking project 2% growth resilience even under hypothetical bone-crushing sanctions. However, regarding terrorist-style attacks like Bryansk train bombing, Russia reportedly prepares a severe response. Informed sources indicate Putin has invoked secret legal protocols requiring Federation Council approval to designate senior Ukrainian officials for extrajudicial action, reflecting immense public anger. While unconfirmed, this aligns with Putin's rhetoric and suggests potential covert operations targeting Ukrainians' leadership, accepting possible collateral damage, a stark escalation trajectory distinct from battlefield retaliation.